Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like if you're enjoying our Hello Explorations. Today we're venturing into the realm of terror and urban myths with a deep dive into something that haunts bedrooms around the world, nocturnal terrors. You probably know them better as sleep paralysis.
What's truly intriguing about sleep paralysis is its global reach. It's a phenomenon that transcends cultural boundaries, with people from all corners of the world reporting strikingly similar experiences for centuries.
Yeah, it's a bit unnerving, isn't it? To think that no matter where you are, this feeling of terror can creep into your sleep. We'll be unpacking not just the science, but the unsettling consistency of how people experience and interpret these episodes.
Let's begin with what science tells us. During REM sleep, our brains are buzzing with activity, but our bodies are essentially offline. Paralyzed. Sleep paralysis happens when your brain wakes up before your body catches up, leaving you aware of your surroundings but completely unable to move.
So we understand the mechanics of why we're frozen. But what's fascinating and a bit terrifying is why this often comes with a feeling of dread, a sense that something sinister is present. And how is it that people across cultures and time periods report seeing similar figures, these shadowy entities, during these episodes?
That's where the scientific explanation starts to fade and the mystery deepens. While we can explain the paralysis, the consistent emotional and visual experiences remain largely unexplained. To navigate this unsettling landscape, researchers have identified 6 main categories of entities encountered during sleep paralysis, drawing from countless personal accounts and historical records.
That's helpful. At least we have a framework. Let's start with the old hag. This one seems to be deeply embedded in folklore worldwide.
The old hag is a recurring figure, typically depicted as a malevolent older woman who sits on your chest, stealing your breath, your energy, or even your youth. She appears in various forms, from the pesadilla in Brazil to the Yoro in Africa.
And here in the U.S., she even made an appearance during the Salem witch trials. Wasn't one of the accused, Bridget Bishop, said to be tormented by an old hag sent by a witch? It really shows how deeply ingrained this figure is in our collective consciousness.
Exactly. The old hag transcends simple folklore. She taps into primal fears of vulnerability, suffocation, and the loss of vitality. It's no wonder she appears so consistently across cultures.
Okay, moving on to shadow people. These are particularly unsettling because people report seeing them even when they're not experiencing sleep paralysis. Imagine just catching a glimpse of a dark figure lurking at the edge of your vision, and then it vanishes when you turn to look directly at it.
The theories about shadow people range from interdimensional beings to manifestations of our own subconscious fears. Some even connect them to extraterrestrial phenomena. But their true nature remains elusive.
It's like they exist on the periphery of our awareness, just out of reach of our understanding. There's one shadow person in particular that I find especially intriguing and perhaps a bit more modern, the Hat Man.
The Hat Man is a relatively recent addition to the sleep paralysis pantheon, often described as a tall, shadowy figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat, sometimes a fedora, and a long coat. He's frequently seen lurking in the shadows, observing rather than directly interacting.
I recall a YouTube comment describing an encounter with the Hat Man. The commenter described this overwhelming feeling of dread, like being watched by something ancient and malevolent.
His appearance, while simple, seems to tap into a primal fear of the unknown, the unseen observer. And just like the other shadow people, his true nature and purpose remain shrouded in mystery.
All right. We've had our encounter with the old hag and ventured into the shadows with shadow people. What terrifying entity awaits us next in this exploration of sleep paralysis?
Our next category is one you might find particularly relatable, given your interest in folklore and the supernatural. We're moving into the realm of ghosts.
Ghosts. Now we're talking. I've always been fascinated by ghost stories.
And in the context of sleep paralysis, ghosts take on a particularly chilling dimension. The phrase, "se te subió el muerto," in Mexican culture, perfectly encapsulates this. It literally translates to, "the dead got on top of you," highlighting the belief that a ghost is responsible for the paralysis.
That's a vivid way to describe it. And it speaks to how deeply embedded the belief in ghosts is in many cultures. What types of ghosts are typically encountered during these episodes?
It varies. Some people report seeing deceased loved ones, while others encounter malevolent spirits. There's a tragic and particularly unsettling story about Hmong refugees who came to the United States in the 1970s.
Yes, I've heard about this. A significant number of these refugees, mostly young men, died mysteriously in their sleep.
Over several years, more than 100 seemingly healthy Hmong men died. Many witnesses described hearing the victims cry out in terror before their deaths, and some victims even spoke of experiencing terrifying nightmares.
What's even more unsettling is that doctors were completely baffled. They couldn't find any medical explanation and eventually labeled it sudden unexpected nocturnal death syndrome.
While the medical community remained puzzled within the Hmong community, there was a strong belief that these deaths were caused by vengeful spirits, possibly from their homeland, attacking them in their sleep.
It's a tragic story that really highlights the cultural complexities surrounding sleep paralysis. The intersection of unexplained death, vivid nightmares, and cultural beliefs creates a chilling narrative.
It certainly makes you wonder how much of what we experience during sleep paralysis is shaped by our cultural understanding of the world, our deepest fears, and the stories we've been told.
This is all incredibly fascinating, but I think I need a moment to catch my breath before we delve into the next category.
Take your time. We're about to venture into territory that's even more unsettling. Our next category is demons.
Demons, huh? Now, those are definitely the stuff of nightmares. Do we have any specific examples of demonic entities encountered during sleep paralysis?
Lots of terrifying entities so far.
We've encountered the old hag, lurked in the shadows with shadow people, and even faced the chilling presence of ghosts. Each entity more unsettling than the last. I have to admit, it's made me think twice about turning off the lights at night.
It's understandable to feel a chill when confronting these deeply rooted fears. But remember, these experiences, as terrifying as they can be, offer a unique window into the human psyche.
That's a good point. Let's shift our focus to the psychological aspects of sleep paralysis. Is there a connection between our mental and emotional state and the likelihood of experiencing these episodes?
Research suggests there is. Studies have shown that individuals experiencing stress, sleep deprivation, anxiety, or depression are more prone to sleep paralysis.
So if you're already on edge, your brain is more susceptible to this strange in-between state of awareness and paralysis.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And because fear is such a primal emotion, our minds tend to interpret this state of vulnerability as a threat. We're frozen, unable to react, and our brains scramble to make sense of the situation.
And that's where the terrifying hallucinations come in. The feeling of an ominous presence, the shadowy figures lurking in the corners of our minds.
It becomes a vicious cycle. The fear intensifies the experience, and the heightened experience fuels further fear.
So what can people do to reduce their chances of experiencing sleep paralysis? Besides getting a good night's sleep and maybe avoiding horror movies before bed.
Addressing underlying stress and anxiety is crucial. Practicing good sleep hygiene, like maintaining a regular sleep schedule and creating a relaxing bedtime routine, can also help.
Makes sense. Good sleep habits are important for more than just feeling rested. They might also ward off unwelcome nocturnal visitors. But what about people who experience sleep paralysis even when they're well-rested and not particularly stressed? Are there any strategies for them?
That's where things get a bit more complex. Some individuals find that techniques like meditation or lucid dreaming practices can provide a sense of control during sleep paralysis episodes.
Lucid dreaming is when you're aware that you're dreaming, right? So the idea is if you can become lucid during sleep paralysis, you can recognize it for what it is and potentially even influence the experience.
Exactly. Instead of feeling like a helpless victim, you can become an active participant. You can shift your perspective from fear and paralysis to awareness and agency.
That's a powerful concept. It turns a terrifying experience into an opportunity for self-exploration and mastery.
For some, that shift in perspective can be profoundly transformative.
It's amazing how the mind can be both the source of these terrifying experiences and the key to navigating them. We've delved into the psychological aspect, but I'm also curious about the cultural dimension. We touched on how different cultures interpret sleep paralysis, but what are some other examples of these variations?
In Japan, there's a specific term for sleep paralysis, kanashibari, which translates to bound by iron. It reflects the belief that a vengeful spirit is holding the victim down.
And in traditional Chinese medicine, sleep paralysis is often attributed to an imbalance of yin and yang energies in the body.
These are just a couple of examples. In some Native American cultures, sleep paralysis isn't seen as something to fear, but as a form of shamanic initiation, a way of accessing the spirit world.
So instead of a terrifying episode, it's seen as a sacred experience, a sign of spiritual potential.
Precisely. It underscores how our cultural background profoundly shapes our understanding of the world, even our internal experiences.
What might be perceived as a demonic attack in one culture could be viewed as a spiritual awakening in another. It's a reminder to approach these experiences with cultural sensitivity and an open mind.
There's no single explanation that fits every experience.
We've explored the psychological and cultural facets of sleep paralysis, but there's another realm I'd like to touch on, the one that often captures our imaginations and fuels our fears, the paranormal.
Ah, yes, the world of the unexplained. It's certainly tempting to view sleep paralysis through a paranormal lens, especially given the consistent themes and imagery that appear across cultures.
It makes you wonder, is it just coincidence that people around the world describe encountering shadowy figures, demonic entities, even otherworldly beings during these episodes? Or is there something more to it, something beyond our current understanding?
It's the question that continues to fascinate and intrigue us. Some believe that sleep paralysis opens a doorway to other dimensions, allowing us to glimpse beings that normally reside beyond our perception.
It's a captivating idea, but one that's difficult to prove or disprove scientifically.
Indeed. And even if we entertain the possibility of paranormal activity, it's crucial to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism.
We need to be careful not to jump to conclusions or attribute everything we don't understand to the supernatural.
Critical thinking is essential. We should be open to exploring different possibilities, but also willing to question our assumptions and biases.
That's sound advice for any exploration, whether it's into the realm of the paranormal or the depths of our own minds. So when it comes to the paranormal and sleep paralysis, it seems we're left with more questions than answers.
For now, yes. But the more we learn about this phenomenon, the closer we may get to understanding the nature of consciousness, the boundaries of perception, and maybe even the existence of other realms.
It's as if we're peering through a keyhole into a vast and mysterious universe, catching only fleeting glimpses of what might lie beyond.
And that sense of wonder, of the unknown, is part of what makes this topic so compelling.
We've explored the psychology, the culture, the tantalizing possibilities of the paranormal. What else is there to uncover in this deep dive into nocturnal terrors?
There's one more crucial element we need to address: the power of storytelling in shaping our understanding of this phenomenon.
Storytelling. I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that?
Throughout history, from ancient myths to modern-day anecdotes shared online, stories have played a vital role in how we make sense of the world, especially when faced with the unknown and unexplainable.
We've been telling stories about sleep paralysis for centuries to explain it, to warn others, to cope with our own fears.
Exactly, and these stories, whether passed down through generations or shared on social media, can have a profound impact on our beliefs and behaviors.
Are you suggesting that the stories we tell about sleep paralysis can actually influence how we experience it?
Absolutely. If we grow up hearing tales of demonic entities that attack during sleep paralysis, we're more likely to interpret our own experiences through that lens.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Our expectations shape our perceptions.
Precisely. And the same applies to stories of spiritual awakening or shamanic initiation. If we believe sleep paralysis can be a positive experience, we're more likely to approach it with curiosity rather than terror.
So the stories we tell, the narratives we embrace, can actually shape our reality.
Indeed. And that's why it's crucial to be mindful of the stories we're exposed to and to critically evaluate the information we consume.
We're all part of this collective storytelling process, shaping and reshaping our understanding of the world through the narratives we share.
Especially when dealing with something as mysterious as sleep paralysis, it's essential to consider all the different stories and perspectives out there.
It's been a fascinating journey so far. We've explored the psychology, the culture, the paranormal, and now the power of storytelling. What awaits us in the final chapter of our deep dive? We've journeyed through the shadowy world of sleep paralysis, explored the science, the cultural myths, the psychological impact, and even touched on the unsettling realm of the paranormal. But now I'm curious, where does our understanding of sleep paralysis go from here? What does the future hold?
That's a question that researchers around the world are actively exploring. One exciting avenue is the use of advanced brain imaging techniques like fMRI to study what's happening in the brain during these episodes. We can move beyond self-reported experiences and actually observe the neural activity in real time.
It's like we're finally getting a glimpse behind the curtain, seeing the mechanics of these terrifying experiences unfold in the brain. What kind of insights are researchers hoping to gain from this?
The goal is to pinpoint the specific neural patterns associated with sleep paralysis, which could lead to more targeted and effective treatments. Think of it like having a map of the brain during these episodes, allowing us to see which areas are activated, which neurotransmitters are involved, and how the different stages of sleep contribute to the phenomenon.
That's fascinating. So we're moving from folklore and anecdotal accounts to a more precise understanding of the neurological underpinnings of sleep paralysis. What does this mean for those who experience these episodes? Are there new treatments on the horizon?
Some researchers are investigating the use of medications like antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs to reduce the frequency and intensity of these events. Others are exploring therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to help people manage the fear and anxiety associated with the experience.
So the idea is that if you can address the underlying psychological factors, you might be able to lessen the impact of sleep paralysis, even prevent it altogether.
That's one approach. But what about those cases where sleep paralysis doesn't seem to be rooted in stress or anxiety, where it seems to be triggered by something else entirely?
Those are the cases that really make you wonder, aren't they?
Indeed. That's why researchers are also exploring the role of genetics and family history in sleep paralysis. There's also a growing interest in understanding the connection between sleep paralysis and other sleep disorders like narcolepsy and sleep apnea.
It's like we're putting together a puzzle, recognizing that sleep paralysis isn't isolated but part of a larger, more complex system.
Exactly. And as our understanding of the puzzle grows, so too will our ability to develop more effective interventions.
Speaking of interventions, you mentioned virtual reality earlier. How could VR be used in the context of sleep paralysis? It seems like a bit of a paradox, using technology to address something that happens in the depths of our minds.
It might seem counterintuitive, but VR holds immense potential. Researchers are developing simulations that recreate the sleep paralysis experience, allowing people to confront their fears in a safe and controlled environment.
So instead of being caught off guard in the middle of the night, they can face their fears head-on in a setting where they know they're safe.
Precisely. Think of it like exposure therapy, but instead of facing your fears in the real world, you're doing it in a virtual one. The idea is that by repeatedly exposing yourself to the triggers, you can gradually desensitize yourself to the fear and anxiety.
It's an intriguing approach. Are there any promising results from this type of therapy?
Early studies suggest that VR therapy can be effective in reducing the frequency and severity of sleep paralysis episodes, as well as improving overall sleep quality and reducing anxiety levels. It's still early days, but the potential is certainly there.
It's remarkable how technology can be harnessed to address these deeply personal and often terrifying experiences. But with all this talk of new treatments and interventions, it's important to consider the ethical implications as well.
You raise a crucial point. As we develop more effective ways to treat sleep paralysis, we need to proceed with caution and sensitivity. For example, if we were to develop a medication that completely eliminates sleep paralysis, would that be a good thing? What might be the unintended consequences for brain function or sleep architecture?
That's a thought-provoking question. And what about the use of VR therapy? Could there be a risk of making people's fears worse, especially if the simulations are too realistic or intense?
These are all valid concerns. We need to ensure that any new treatments are thoroughly researched and ethically sound, prioritizing the well-being of the individual seeking help. We also need to remember that for some, sleep paralysis may be more than just a medical condition. It could hold personal or spiritual significance.
It's a reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to understanding and addressing these experiences. Each individual's journey with sleep paralysis is unique.
Indeed. As we move forward, we need to find a balance between scientific advancement and respect for individual experiences and beliefs.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the world of nocturnal terrors, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What should they keep in mind as they navigate their own experiences, or even just try to make sense of this fascinating phenomenon?
Firstly, remember that sleep paralysis is more common than you might think. It's a human experience that has been documented across cultures and throughout history. You're not alone.
And while it can be terrifying, it's important to remember that it's typically not harmful, just a strained quirk of the brain during sleep.
Secondly, there's no single explanation for sleep paralysis. It's a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and cultural factors.
We've journeyed from the science of brain activity during REM sleep to the ancient myths and folklore that have shaped our understanding of these episodes.
And finally, the future holds promise for a deeper understanding and more effective treatments for sleep paralysis. From brain imaging to virtual reality, we're on the cusp of new discoveries that could transform how we view and approach this phenomenon.
This has been a truly fascinating exploration. Thank you for guiding us through this shadowy world of sleep paralysis. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations of intriguing and thought-provoking topics. Until next time, Sleep well and sweet dreams.